Okay guys, welcome to the second part of the tutorial, and if you haven't seen the first part I recommend checking it out. It's not that long, and I guess let's just get started. So this is a new scene. Things for me are set up by default because I do have a saved user file which basically just keeps all my settings for me, which is pretty cool. One of the first things we need to address is the proportions of our objects. Now, I'm not sure how big a bullet should be, but from guesstimating with my fingers, I assume it would be about, I guess, 5 inches. Maybe even smaller, to be honest, maybe even 3 inches. I don't really know the exact size of a bullet, so hey-ho, we're just going to have to guesstimate here. And if we create a cube, this is 200 centimeters by 200, so this is like, I don't know, about maybe 100 inches or something like that, which is way too big. So if we put in, let's say 12 for all of these, this is how big our bullet should technically be, because you know we're guesstimating it to be around 5 inches. If you go into Google, you can do obviously conversions from inches to centimeters, and 5 inches is about 12.7 centimeters. So I'm just going to put it at around 12. And so what we're going to do, we're obviously going to grab our actual bullet here, the null, and we're going to scale it down. And before I do that, I want to make sure that this is in the center, because we're going to be scaling to this object. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure, of course, this is up here, and I'm probably going to put it at, I think it's going to be about 6. It's going to be 7, or is it 6.5? Let's try 7. So 7's fine. We'll just try getting into the correct position. So what we're going to do is going to grab the scale tool, and out in the middle of nowhere, we're just going to scale this down. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find that and drag it down, and preferably in just the Y. And what we're going to do is we're just going to scale it down again, and we're going to scale it down until it's around the size that we want, which is around there, roughly guessed, I suppose. Give a few, it's not too bad. So we're going to delete that cube, and in the viewport you can see how tiny it is now. So I'm going to press H. That'll frame everything that we have. And it is important because V-Ray's lighting is based on real world values. So if you're trying to light something that is way too big, of course you're going to need more lights. So you really need to make sure you have everything in proportion before you go any further. And that's what we did here. Just quickly and easily put this into proportions, and everything looks good. So this tutorial is just going to be about lighting, kind of material setup, and of course rendering. I'm not going to go into too much detail about making it perfect, because that's up to you. That's your creativity there. So if you want to have these bullets crashing into a wall, do that. If you want these bullets to look like they're falling, do that. If you want them to be lined up like soldiers, do that. It's entirely up to you. What way you actually portray this art. Entirely up to you. I'm just kind of showing you some steps along the way. So don't worry about how I set things up. The important bits are how we light it, texture it, and of course render it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, Control S. I'm going to create a cube. Now the reason I save this is because with V-Ray you can get crashes, which are inevitable really, because it is a plugin. So I mean, even Cinema 4D itself crashes, so always good to save. So I've got a cube here. This is going to be my studio. I'm going to hit C, and to make it editable, I'm going to grab the polygons around the front and side, delete them. I'm going to go into the edge mode, select the top and bottom edges. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to bevel these out, something like this. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the rectangle selection tool, check on tolerance selection, uncheck visible elements, and that just allows us to select things and make some slight adjustments, whether that be making this a little bit wider so the camera of course can fit and have a nice seamless background. That's absolutely fine. And we're then going to obviously grab all of these, and you can see that these are actually flipped the wrong way. So what we're going to do is right click, I'm going to use not bevel, extrude. I'm just going to extrude these inwards by probably, actually we'll extrude them outwards by 2.5 and put on create caps, which will then give us the correct look that we're going for. Once we've done that, we want to of course go into the knife tool and we want to sharpen up these edges. So I'm going to grab the loop tool, I'm going to use a loop here and here. It doesn't have to be too precise. I'm going to make one here and one about, probably about here, and then going to do the same on the top. And the reason we do this is because when we drop it into a HyperNerbs, we want it to be a very nice gradual kind of curve. And you can see here we're getting a little bit of a kink, so use UL, select this edge, and we can just move it across here just to kind of smooth that transition out. The top doesn't matter because we're not going to be looking at that. And as you can see here, this is what we have. So I'm going to go into a side view, and I'm going to hit H to frame all this. I'm going to grab this cube, and I'm going to move it up, preferably in just one axis without me hitting 25 keys. And I'm going to move the axes down just so I can position this a little bit more accurately, and then I'm going to move this up because this is the floor. We want it to be as accurate as possible, and I think maybe there looks pretty good, looks pretty damn good to me. And we're then going to go into of course the perspective and maybe just move this down a tiny bit, and that looks golden. So where do we go from here? Well, one of the things we need to do is obviously set up the render settings. So I'm going to open up the render settings. I'm going to, of course, go and enable V-Ray Bridge. I'm going to go into the V-Ray settings, and we're going to kind of set these up. So let me just see if things are set up for me. So the first thing we're going to do, of course, is going to go to, let me just make this a tiny bit bigger for you. We're going to go to Indirect Illumination, so GI. We're going to turn that bad boy on, and we're going to go to a preset here which is 01. It's IR and LC, so light, cache, iridescence, radiance, and we're going to put it on very, very fast so it renders out pretty fast. We're then going to go to the environment, and in the environment what we want to do is we want to use a HDRI map. Now I already have one plugged in here, and again, you will have to find your own HDRI because I can't supply these because they are bought, and part of the license agreement tells me that I can't distribute these. And of course, because I post them on YouTube, I could get into trouble and my channel could get shut down. So don't want to take the risk, unfortunately. But if you do go on Google, you can find free ones as well as other ones. So feel free to, of course, go there. The reason for the HDRI is simply to give us an environment to reflect off. Because we're going to be using a reflective surface for the metal to reflect, we obviously need something to reflect. Now, if you take a bullet in real life, you go to your bedroom or your kitchen or your front room and you take a picture of it, then it's reflecting everything in that environment. Couches, kettles, fires, anything, even people. So that's why we use a HDRI to mimic that. And of course, most HDRIs are outside, but you can get interior ones as well. So it really depends how you want to set this up. You can also use studio ones, which is kind of just like fake lighting. They work well with, of course, reflective materials. So now that we've got that out of the way, what I did is I went in and reduced the exposure because at 0 it's way too blown out, so you can't see anything. So with a -3 exposure, it brings it down so you can actually see the detail. So the next thing I'm going to do is going to go to colour mapping. I'm going to change some of these settings. We're going to put it onto exponential. I'm going to put the gamma back to 1. Turn off linear workflow, and we're going to turn on subpixel mapping and clamp out. So these are the settings that we're going to be using, and then what we can do is we can just do a quick render from this kind of distance. What you're going to see is some, of course, very poor lighting, simply because the HDRI we're using isn't the greatest, and we have no real lights. So this is what we have, a very flat object basically. So I guess the first thing we should do is just create a standard V-Ray advanced material and put this onto our bullet and of course our environment. This will help give us accurate results because V-Ray doesn't really mesh well with standard shaders, so we have to use the V-Ray equivalent, which in this case is an advanced material. So from here, what we can do is we can add in our lights. So I'm going to go to the lights, I'm going to use an area light, and the area light is a very simple light to use. It gives us really nice shadows, except it's going to give us longer render times just because of the shadows. So I'm going to go to the rotation tool, I'm going to rotate this around by 90 degrees. In this term it's going to be -90, and what I'm looking at is this blue axis here, because that's where the light's going to point. I'm then going to go into a side view and I'm going to reduce this light just a tiny bit, and I kind of want to make it, of course, on the same level as this, and I want to of course move it back. Now it may be a little bit too tall, which in this case it is. We don't want it too tall, and maybe a little bit too wide, so something along them lines. Now I'm looking at where the bullet is placed and I'm looking at where the light is placed, so I want to just rotate it round maybe a few degrees. So it's going to be -80 now instead of 90, and just a very slight rotation in the P orientation here. So I'm just going to put this to 5, and in this case it's going to be -5. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want the light to be, of course, shooting from this side but also down a tiny bit. I'm also going to grab this light, duplicate it, and then I'm going to basically reverse these values. So it's going to be 80 and 5 and hit apply. I can then move this back, and maybe we want to put this back to -5. We do, and that looks okay. In fact, that looks pretty good. Now one of the things you can see is it's really blown out, and that's because of the settings. So if we just do a quick render from here, hopefully you'll get kind of you know, an insight to what this is going to look like. For the rendering, I'll probably will pause the video just because I don't want to take up too much time in one video, especially when these renders can hit up to, you know, 5 minutes. So this is what we have. It looks pretty good. You can't really see anything. That's because we don't have the correct tags on. So what we're going to do, select both of these, right click, go down to V-Ray Bridge. We're going to hit V-Ray Lights. We're then going to make a dominant light, which is going to be the left side. That's going to be the first light. We're going to click on the V-Ray tag. The settings in the actual light don't particularly matter. It's the V-Ray tag that matters. So for both of these, I'm going to change the intensity units to watts. And you can see these are quite high. So for the first one, I'm going to put this to probably about 3. And for this one, I'm probably going to put it about 2. Now this may be too low, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to save this first and then go into interactive render region, and I just want a small section, if I could grab it. So just a small section here to kind of view how this light is actually interacting. So I can bring this down quite far, and I can see here that this needs to be up to about 6 perhaps. That looking good, and put this one to about 4. So now we have a quite bright scene, which is what we're looking for really. And yeah, you can't really see any detail, but that's fine because all we're actually interested in is how this looks with the light. So I'm going to go into the shadows. I'm not going to enable them just yet because the render times will shoot up. I'm going to go into the area light properties and obviously check visible for both of these. And I guess what we could do as well is, I'll get to that in a second actually. I'm going to be using a texture for this, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So once we've got that kind of set up, I think one last thing I want to do is actually change the color, which is down here in the common tab. I want to make this the good old soft and dark color. So one's going to be like an orange color and one's going to be kind of a bluey color, and this is going to give us this kind of contrast, which is really nice in these situations. So I'm going to turn off interactive render region, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here on this, and I'm just going to give it a quick render without coughing. So good at coughing. So you can see this is rendering out pretty fast, and that's because we don't have any major materials on this, which is nice. Now I can see in the viewport the bottom looks kind of cut off. So with that being said, I'm going to go to the side view, and you can see here most of it actually is cut off. So what I want to do is I want to go to the axes tool and just move this over here slightly, turn it back off, and then I can move it to where it kind of works, which looks like it's not going to be anywhere close here. So I'm just going to do a little bit of editing, grab this and move it in just one axis, something like that, and then just kind of move this over to where it starts. And this is quite important because it technically is the floor, so we want it to mesh well together, so that looks better. So go in and do another quick render just of that bottom section. I mean the differences are quite noticeable. So looking at this, it looks pretty good. What we can do is we can just temporarily enable the shadows and do a quick render, and we can kind of see, you know, how this looks. It should look a lot better. Yeah, we've got some shadows there, so now it breaks up that connection from the floor and the bullet, which is important. So we've got kind of a core lighting setup, and we can add more lights later, but for now this one looks good. This side is really bright, which is nice. It's the key light basically, which looks good. I guess we should really start working on the material now. So I'm going to create a new shader. It's going to be an advanced material, and what I want to do is go through some of these settings. So for the diffuse color, we want to create a gold bullet, so we need a color that represents gold. So I think something maybe like 230 by 180 by 40 looks kind of good. I'm going to put the brightness up to 100% because I want 100% of this colour. I'm going to apply it to our bullet, which is going to be there, and delete that one because we don't need it. And then what we can do is load up the interactive render region and kind of just get this little section here and let it render out basically. So there we go. We don't need anything else but this section, and this is kind of just a little visual update of how everything is, of course, playing together. So one of the things we're going to need to do, of course, is enable specular. So I'm going to enable specular, and in the specular we want the bullet to have a similar gold reflection. So I believe it was 230 by 180 by 40. So now we've got this, you can see once it updates we have a much yellower material rather than that kind of white haze colour, which is something that we don't particularly want. What we need to do to make this really stand out is go down here to the specular layer Fresnel, enable use Fresnel. This is going to give us our reflectivity. Now gold is quite reflective, so I'm going to put this up to about 12, as you can see in the viewport, and even in the render here that we have a quite reflective looking material, which is pretty cool. It's starting to get there, which is nice. What we want to do is we want to blur the reflection slightly, so I'm going to bring this reflection glossiness down to about 91. Again, these settings, you need to play with them. It's all about playing with these and, you know, kind of knowing what setting does what, really. For the highlight glossiness, I'm going to up it to about 0.7, which is just going to tighten them reflection and glossy rays and give us a much tighter, of course, edge. Now you can soften the edges if you want, so I'm probably going to soften them about to 0.05. You're not going to make much of a difference, but it will make a difference. And we also want to play around with the anisotropy here, and I'm going to increase this to about 6.6, and this will just help break up the lines to give us, you know, some different diagonals. And of course you can go in and you can play with the settings as well to get a result that, you know, you kind of like. So looking at this, it looks okay so far. We're obviously still playing with the settings. I think I'm going to add another specular layer here, and pretty much the same settings. Fresnel's going to be about 12. The anisotropy, I'm not going to have any of that. The glossiness we're going to bring down to probably 8.6. I'm going to bring up the highlight glossiness to 7, and I'm not sure of the colour. I kind of want to see in the viewport what it looks like. So again, we need to change the colour because it's looking pretty good. However, it's not particularly good. So I'm going to change the highlight to a goldy colour. Maybe that's a little bit too gold, so maybe a little bit brighter. And looking at that, it's looking pretty good. Quite happy with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the quality in the viewport, and we're going to add a bump onto this. So in the bump channel, we're going to enable the bump. We're going to use a noise shader, and we're going to reduce the scale of this to probably 0.1, so 0.1%. Now the reason it's so low is because, don't forget, we scaled our scene down to be about what would it be, 12 centimeters, so it's very, very small. So again, a lot of this is scene specific. So looking at this, it's obviously way too bumpy, so we're going to reduce this down to 0.1 also, and we're going to see what that does. Now the reason we add bump is because it breaks up the surface from the glossiness, and as you can see here, it's still way too much. So what I'm going to do is going to put this down to 0.01, and that's pretty much the bare minimum. I could probably put another 0 in there. Now this effect is only supposed to be subtle. It's not supposed to be in your face, so keep that in mind. So looking at this, it actually looks pretty good. So I'm going to use bump shadows for that extra bit of realism. I'm going to turn off interactive render region, save it, and then grab the render region and just render out this section here. So I'll probably leave this on. I won't stop the video just because this will be quite fast. And looking at this, it's looking pretty good. The gold material is coming along really nicely, and it's looking pretty damn good in my opinion. Again, there's a few things we could tweak. There's always things we can tweak. In fact, we could go into the specular layer, and in this specular layer here, we can basically put in, of course, a specular map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to put in a noise shader. Now if I put on the interactive render region, you'll see things change drastically. Mainly the colour, because of course the colour affects how this will look. So you can see we get like this kind of grey bullet, which is obviously not what we want. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to change the noise type to something maybe like this. Not sure what it is. I guess it's fire. I'm going to reduce the size down to probably 20%. Let's have a look at that. So looking at the bullet, it looks pretty good, a little bit too high, so I'm going to probably put this down to about 5%. And the reason we're doing this is for the kind of detail, really. So for this colour, I'm going to put it to 230 by 180 by 40, I believe it was. And then this one, of course, is going to be white. Now we only want this to be a slight variation, so we're going to just put in our own random colour there. Then what we can do is we can go over here and change the mix mode to probably multiply, and you can see when it renders out we're going to have some slight detail in colour variation, which is really nice, and it's really what we want. Now if it's too much, we can also reduce the mix strength. I think what I'm going to do is render this to picture viewer, which hopefully won't take too long. I'll leave this one to render through while I'm talking. If it does take any longer than a minute, then I will pause it, because I don't want this tutorial to be too long. Now, one of the things that you have to realize is when I was creating this tutorial, I spent literally 2 full days rendering out passes of this material. Every time I had to make an adjustment, I had to render it out, and the reason I rendered it out in picture viewer is because then I could go through the different pictures that it's rendered out and have a look and see what difference this 5% actually made. And it's really important that you do that process, for one, to learn new things about what specific things do, such as the mix strength. You know, it might seem obvious, but maybe it's not to some people. So if I put the mix strength to 0.5, how much of an influence does that have? And again, with these settings, a lot of these settings do require a lot of experimentation. So stuff like the soften edges, highlight glossiness, they require a lot. The reflective glossiness, not so much, because it is kind of what it says on the tin. The anisotropy really does require a lot of experimentation as well. The Fresnel, if you don't have the values, requires that as well. So it's not too bad, but again, you can experiment with different things, such as especially breaking up the surface, because as you can see in here, we have this kind of this pattern, this very faint pattern. I'm not sure if you can see it, but you can see like here when it gets lighter and then it's darker, which is really nice because it just helps to sell that this isn't a perfect bullet, and it is different, you know. So that looks pretty good in my opinion. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new V-Ray advanced material, and in here all we're going to do is put on the luminosity. In the luminosity, we're going to create a gradient, and in this gradient we're going to create a few of these bands, and it's going to be a black and white band. So black, white, and black. There we go. So why am I doing this? Well, because we want to simulate as close as possible to real world values. We want to kind of mimic things. And what this does is, if we go into the lights and if we go into the area light, use a texture, and of course if we put this texture in here, it will work. Now I can't actually remember which one I put it in. I think it was here for the light color. I'm not sure. Let me just double check that, and I guess I'll show you the scene while I'm here. But the light is here, and if I'm not mistaken, which I often am, it's down here and it's the channel, so I was correct. It's just in a different one. So in here I'm actually going to copy this channel, and in the lights I'm going to paste the channel in here, and what this will do is it will give our lights that kind of I don't know, a different feel, and you should see it in the actual reflections. As you can see here, you can see now we have these two nice striped lines coming down, which is just kind of giving us the influence of being in a studio. It's giving these extra highlights which just really help sell it. Again, if you want to make these wider, which I'll show you in a second, because I want some to kind of come around the front here, what I'm going to do is I will basically come out of here, and I'm going to hit H in all of these windows and H in here, and I'm going to take this light, and all I'm going to do is just make it slightly longer, which will fade the light, and I'm also going to slightly rotate it a little bit more, like so. So then I'm going to grab the bullet and hit S. It should allow me to zoom in. There we go. And if we do a quick region render here, you might see a few things change. So one of them may be the lights, of course, got darker because they are now bigger, so the intensity will need to be increased. Also, you can see these lines are much further apart, which is pretty cool. Now again, you could go into the actual texture on both of these, and again you could maybe just pop out one of these and make them a little bit bigger. So I'll probably change this one to white, and then we can just kind of adjust these, which looks pretty good. And then again, go in and do a quick render, and this is just a really nice technique to give your reflective objects just something different to reflect, especially when your environment is so big. It's not going to reflect too much unless it's like really chrome, so this just kind of helps out, which is nice. If of course this is, you know, too in your face, you can obviously reduce the colors. I'm not going to go into like too much, you know, detail right now, just because this tutorial is already 32 minutes long, but this is kind of what you want to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to grab the bullet, and I'm going to just quickly set up in the MoGraph, put it into a cloner, and I'm going to, of course, clone this, not in the Y, probably in the Z. So in the Z, I'm going to put this down to the side. I'm going to rotate it over slightly, and I'm just going to increase the number, and I'm going to reduce the, I think, going to be the offset. No, it's not the offset, it's is it the step size? It's not the step size. I'm sure it's one of these. I'm sure it's this one. Nope, it's not that one. Which one is it? I can't remember which one it is. It's to reduce the distance between the clones. I haven't used the cloner in quite a while, to be honest. I'm sure it's one of these. My mind eludes me. I'm sure it's one of these. I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter, because this isn't setting this up to be anything more than what we've got here, so that's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the side view and make sure these three are actually sitting on the floor, which they now are, or are they? Let's just double check that. And we want to kind of move this up slightly. And preparation is obviously key here. If we created this a little bit better, we won't have to do all this crazy adjustments, really. Okay. So there we go, we've got our scene and we're pretty happy with that. So if we just do a quick render of that section, you can see we now have 3 bullets. Everything looks amazing. Rendering this out, they all look cool. Pretty happy with that. Pretty good. So what we need to do now is the depth of field. Now the depth of field it's weird. Let me just put it that way. So I'm just going to group all these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this base material back on these objects. And why am I doing that? Well, simply put, the gold material takes too long to render. And you need to do a lot of adjustment with this. So, first things first, create a camera. With this camera, we're going to right click and we're going to go to the V-Ray tags and put on a physical camera. And we're going to do a little test render, just a very quick one here. And you can see nothing changes. It's pretty much how it was minus the gold material. Okay, fantastic. Now let's go into the camera and let's do another test render. And you'll see straight away, without any magic, that the scene is well dark. It's really, really dark. Now why is that? It's because the settings don't mesh well with the V-Ray camera. It uses real world values for the things like f-stop, film ISO and a shutter speed. Now if you're a photographer, you will know all these. They're very common to you. They're what you use to take good photos. I am sadly not a photographer, so these don't mean much to me in terms of what they do, but I know what to adjust them if that makes sense, which it probably doesn't. So the f-stop is the main one we need to focus on. The higher f-stop, the fainter the depth of field will be. The smaller the f-stop, the more powerful the f-stop will be. Now, it's very difficult to kind of explain, so let me just show you. So we're going to go to sampling in the V-Ray tag on the camera. We're going to put on depth of field. We're then going to go into a side view, and what we need to do is we need to use, where is it? All the way down here. See if I can find it in a different view. This middle point here is pretty much the focal length, and this will pretty much solely, you know, it solely defines the depth of field. So if we want to make this first one in focus, we put the little point in the middle of the camera to that. So if we render out this section now, you will see, hopefully, very faintly, that's not really going to work. Maybe you can, but let me just increase the brightness. I'm going to go into the lens parameters, and I'm going to go down to the ISO, and I'm going to increase this to about 600. Just do another quick render here at the back, because this is kind of what we want to see, and you can see it's a little bit brighter now, which is nice, and you can see the depth of field is quite strong back there, and then it obviously fades off the closer we get to the focal point, which of course is this first bullet. So in my opinion, actually that's pretty spot on. That's really nice. Quite happy with that. One thing that's bugging the crap out of me is the fact that this back one is a little bit lame. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly go into the cube here, and I'm going to put on a knife tool. I'm just going to add another one here, which I need to deselect them first, and then go to the knife tool and just create another edge there. That's going to basically straighten this edge out, which I would hope it would. And then we're just going to grab this and grab the move tool, just so we can actually see where we're moving this to, and just slightly move it back and move it up. There we go. Now one thing is the cloner. I'm not sure if it's because of that. Oh, it is because of that. So it wasn't because of that. You goof. So that was actually spot on. It's because we actually adjusted the other side by 1%, which, well, there you have it. Now, the one thing that has annoyed me is that it's actually took it out of the thing that we wanted to do. We just want to rotate it. Now, for some reason, it's going in a few axes. Well, this is what I didn't want to get involved in. Actually setting up the scene, it's kind of annoying. But let me see. Well, I want it to be linear. There we go. We'll do that. We'll just rotate it there. 20 I said. Done. No one cares. Let's move on. Right. So I'm going to go to the camera again, to the lens, and I'm going to increase the shutter speed. Well, I'm actually going to reduce the shutter speed to about, I say, 150. So if we do a quick render here, now all these settings do play together. So if you reduce the f-stop, let's just have a pay attention to the back here. So this is what we have. If we reduce the f-stop to 2 and do another render, you'll see a few things happening. One, it's too bright, and hopefully you'll see that it's really blurred at the back. And as I said before, the lower you go in f-stop, the more blurry it will be. The higher you go, the less effective the depth of field will be. So you really need to find the balance here, which can be super difficult, but it is worth it in the long run. So looking at this, obviously way too blurry. So I think 8 was really good. So if I reduce this to 2, I would have to reduce the ISO down, and I would also have to, of course, increase the shutter speed. So it's kind of reduce the top or increase the top, and you always obviously reduce the bottom one. So let me just explain them a little bit more clearly. Depending on your depth of field, you will have to either increase the film ISO to make it brighter, and you will have to reduce the shutter speed to make it brighter. If you want to make it darker, you do the opposite. You decrease the ISO and you increase the shutter speed. So that's kind of how I'm trying to explain it. So looking at this, it's a little still too dark for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase this to 1000, and I'm going to reduce this to 120. And then if I do a quick render region, you will see it becomes a lot brighter, which is pretty nice. Now if this is still too dark, I can go even lower, put this to 50 and do a quick render, and you'll see it'll get even brighter, which is nice. I'm still not too happy with the overall look of this, so I'm probably going to put this to 1500 and then do another quick render. And you can see straight away that it is a lot brighter now. So if I'm happy with the way the colour looks, the overall feel looks, and I'm happy with the depth of field, we can then progress from there. So looking at this, it looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the bullet material again, which in case I just need to delete the temporary tag. And then what we can do is do a final render. So, as this is rendering out, let's talk a little bit about this tutorial. I wasn't sure how I wanted to do this tutorial because 9 times out of 10, doing specific tutorials, especially lighting, they take a long time. I mean, this video is about 44 minutes right now. So it's taking a long time to go through the settings. Because the settings are so sensitive, you have to do lots and lots of different renders. Especially if you're working really hard on a material, you really just need to go in and tweak things. And the only way you can do that is by testing. And as I said before, I spent 2 days on the one that I was doing before, the final one that I did, so I could show you the process of this. And that took, you know, 2 days to pretty much just get the material right, because that was the main source of agony for me, was the materials. Because the V-Ray materials are so vast and they can be very, very powerful, especially with the multiple specular layers that you can have, you can create so many really cool effects. So for me, it did take a while, but it was worth it. I'll probably end up posting my one as the thumbnail for the video tutorials. I'll probably supply it as well in the download package that you can download for this series, and you can have a look at the scene as well, to see, you know, how I set up my material, and of course how I went through my process of setting everything up. Now, this material doesn't look a lot really like my material, and the reason for that is because this is a tutorial. A lot of the aspects were rushed, so I do recommend, when you are coming to create your materials and your scene, don't rush. You've got all the time in the world to create something fantastic, and it will be well worth it once you create it. Now again, because this is a tutorial, things were rushed. I couldn't spend a lot of time doing certain things, just because, you know, we're not made of time when we're trying to learn something. We just want to learn how to do it, the basics, and then we can progress from there. But looking at this, it doesn't look too bad, to be honest. And the depth of field in the back is really grainy, and that's because you just need to increase the subdivisions in the cam over here. So if you go into the camera, into these samples, you just need to increase the subdivisions here. 6 is good. You probably could put this to 16 and get a decent result. Much like in any of these, in the lights you can increase the subdivisions and all that kind of stuff. In the materials, they're currently set to 8, I believe. So we'll just go down the bottom here, and you can see the subdivisions for the reflections are set to 8. In my render it was 32, so again that does add to render times. But you can see from here, it looks okay. It doesn't look too bad. What I'll do is I'll just go to the desktop, and I will open up the bullet here, and I will show you my final render, which actually I don't need to. It's here. So what I can do is I can just kind of bring this down and kind of show you one, that the color difference. I guess that's, you know, the main thing. So let's just have a look here if we can do this. I'm so skilled. So as you can see, they do look similar. I think the only thing that's different, that's a major difference really, is the color, the brightness of the gold. In some ways I actually kind of prefer this one. It's a lot bright, it's a lot more vibrant, and that's just solely down to the colors we chose. And how do we understand that? Well, let's just have a look here. So that looks pretty good. I think I'm gonna save that. I will save it as a still, and I will just save it to my desktop for now. And let's just do that, because the color that I use for the diffuse layer here is 230 by 180 by 40. If we go to the other tutorial, and I believe it's this one. Nope, it's not. I'm so muddled up. My model, there we go. I know I've put this as bronze, but it's actually gold. I was gonna go for a bronze, but then I said no, I'll go for gold. So as you can see, the 10% difference here really made a huge difference, and also the brightness as well. So that made a significant difference to the overall color, because even though ours was 230 by 180 by 40, we're actually halving that by 50%. So it's probably something like 115 by maybe 60 by 25, and that's a much darker color. Again, you could go in and you could do that. It's entirely up to you, because this is where experimentation comes in. So if we went in here and halved this by 50, and then we came in and obviously did a little render region here, how much darker would that gold be? Would it be more vibrant? Would it be more darker? Would it be lighter? Probably not, wouldn't be lighter, but you never know. These are all the things for you to experiment with. And unfortunately in tutorial you can't do too much experimenting just because time is of the essence. But yeah, I mean, you know, that difference in 10% made a huge difference in the final outcome to this outcome. So like I said before, the settings are important, so make sure you get them correct and spend time on them. Spend time getting them good and done. So yeah, that's pretty much of this tutorial. It's about 50 minutes now, or come close to 51 minutes, so I don't want to waste any more of your time. So thank you very much guys for watching this tutorial. I know it was long, but I hope it was worth it for you. Really enjoyed doing this tutorial. There will be many more V-Ray tutorials to come for you guys. If there's anything in particular you want to learn about V-Ray, specific materials, how to create specific materials, how to light specific scenes, if you've got a scene that you're having trouble lighting, you could send it to me. I could do a tutorial on it. So different things like that. Feel free to just be spontaneous and obviously leave comments. Also, don't forget to hit the thumbs up, because this is a long tutorial and my throat is about to die. And also, if you enjoy the channel and the videos that I produce, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and of course share it with your friends. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next tutorial. Thanks again. Bye.